everyone, it's your guy, Don James. If you're interested in all things movies related, you're in the right place. On this channel, I'll be focusing on exploring and diving into film franchises, rankings, mostly of a unique type. So today I wanted to start off talking about ranking the Pixar sequels, but excluding the Toy Story sequels, because I feel like kind of everyone mostly would consider Toy Story to be at the top. So I kind of want to exclude them and just focus on the sequels that are not as highly regarded. So without further ado, for those of you who don't know, there are 5 Pixar sequels as of 2024 outside of Toy Story. They are Cars 2, Cars 3, Finding Dory, Monsters University, and Incredibles 2. Yes, technically Monsters University is a prequel, but it's still kind of in the sequel category, just a different type. So most of these have actually been released in the 2010s. That's kind of around the end of what's generally considered Pixar's golden age with Toy Story 3, and went straight into Cars 2. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah, I know that most people, most of y'all probably do love the Toy Story sequels. I know I do, but maybe on another video I might include them, but not this one. Let's get started. Number 5, Cars 2. Where do I even start with this movie? Yeah. This is my least favorite Pixar movie. It's one of my least favorite animated movies in general. It's one of my least favorite movies of all time, actually. But, yeah, this was just a total misfire. And just to give a little background, I first watched this movie straight after watching the first Cars movie. And I really enjoyed the first Cars movie. I was so pleasantly surprised by it because I wasn't really knowing what to expect. And I immediately just wanted to watch the second Cars movie. And oh my goodness, that was one of the biggest disappointments that I've ever had watching a movie. It appears I'm not really alone on that either, because when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, yikes. The critic score for it was a 39, and the audience score was a not too much better with a 49. So yeah, just for context, to this day, it is the first and only Pixar movie to get rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. And boy, I do think it deserves it. Just right off the bat, oh my gosh. The biggest problem with this movie is this guy. They just decided to take the first movie, which was a sports film about Lightning McQueen learning to overcome his ego and help those around him, to being a spy comedy with the comic relief Mater in the lead role. Just can't explain that to me. Why would they decide that with the first Cars movie, which already wasn't super acclaimed, that they would decide to deviate from the sport genre, the race car aspect, and decide to make some kind of gimmicky spy movie. I mean, oh my gosh. I like Mater as a character, at least in the first movie, but like, he does not belong in a main character role. And he just got under my skin in this stinking film. Um, but beyond that, I mean, there's so much else that's wrong with this movie. Like, I mean, the main plot is like some villain that's trying to sabotage Grand Prix racers with like some improper gasoline or oil in order to like um what promote his own oil or so. I mean, it is just total nonsense. The villain is just so lame. Could not care less about whatever the heck that stinking gas, oil, whatever is. Just, oh my gosh, this movie was a big misfire for me. I mean, on the positive notes, like, I mean, it does have great animation. I mean, when it does focus on like the Grand Prix aspects, that's pretty cool. But could not care less about Mater's stupid romance with Holly, whatever her name is. Could not care less about Lightning's fight with Mater and his whole arc of trying to not feel stupid. It was so lame, so corny. Just, oh, this movie's garbage. Moving on. Number 4. Cars 3. Yeah, so right off the bat, this certainly is a improvement over Cars 2, but I would still kind of have it around like the bottom tier of Pixar movies. That's not to say it's not good. I mean, it's still good. I do enjoy it, but I mean, it's okay by Pixar standards. But one of the best things this film did was that it actually got back to the racing aspect of Cars. Like, it felt like the actual proper sequel to Cars 1, where we get to see Lightning back on the track and with a new plot line of like trying to thrive in an environment where he's trying to age and like, he might have to consider retirement. And I kind of like that they took his character in that direction. It's a logical route to take it. Route. Sorry, but no pun intended. But yeah, I mean, I know that this kind of plot line is somewhat generic, but it didn't bother me too much. I mean, I didn't really know a ton of sports films anyway beforehand of this type before watching it, so I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But I mean, I enjoyed Cruz's character. I enjoyed her training Lightning McQueen, and not gonna lie, that first sequence that they showed in like the teaser trailers and in the movie where he's just like flipping out of control, it was like, whoa, I was wondering what direction they'd take that. And it was a little bit underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie, but I mean, I still did enjoy it. I thought it would have a little bit more impact on the plot than it did, but it was still good. It was still, overall, it worked for me. And actually had some pretty standout funny moments for me. Like, one of the biggest was like when they were at the training facility and Lightning McQueen wasn't used to the simulators, and he was just telling Cruz like, I got it, and like he ended up driving straight off the track, crashing through the wall. I mean, I had to pause the movie because I could not breathe with how funny that was. But yeah, I mean, the two biggest issues with this film is that it's the villain, like Jackson Storm or Johnny Storm. I don't totally remember his name, but I mean, that kind of speaks a little bit to like how generic of a villain he was. I mean, he had a cool design, and I guess I kind of liked a little bit of what he represented as like the newer generation. But other than that, he's like pretty flat. Um, I didn't care too much for him, and like, but my biggest problem with this movie is the third act twist. Now, the twist itself isn't that bad, but like the decision to like have Cruz enter the race in the middle of the race is just so mind-bogglingly silly that I was just like, it pulled me straight out of the movie. Like, like why wouldn't every racer just do that if you're just allowed to randomly introduce a completely new racer as long as they have your number? It just makes zero sense at all. It just seems like complete gimmicky cheating just because they wanted to have some kind of last second twist. And I mean, it did not work for me. It did not work for me. And that alone like drove this movie down a full drove, pun intended there, but it did drive down this movie a full point for me at least. And just in general, I just say that the plot overall is just not as creative or engaging as most Pixar films. So I still think it's a fine movie, but it's still kind of behind a good bit of most of Pixar's films. Number 3, Finding Dory. So this is kind of an interesting film to me where it feels like most people enjoy this movie, but at the same time it's like they don't entirely seem to have much wrong to say about it, but it's just not usually a top tier film for most people. And I kind of agree with that. Like, I think it's a really good movie and definitely like well above the Cars sequels. But I don't think it's like a great movie either, like top tier. But I don't necessarily have like a ton of issues with it either. It's just really good. Um, One thing that really didn't like work about this film was just kind of the just Dory herself. Like, she's just a very likable character. It's very easy for someone like her to become annoying, but like, I mean, the writers just know how to do it properly, and her camaraderie all throughout the movie with like Marlin and Nemo, with Hank, with the other characters at the aquarium or the Marine Life Institute. It's just like it's very enjoyable. It's very works very well, and I'd say this is the example of how to do a comedic relief in the lead properly. Like, this is what Cars 2 kind of failed at with Mater, because like unlike that movie, Dory actually has a lot more depth to her than Mater. Depth. But no, but anyway, yeah, she has more depth than Mater does, and it makes it so that her relation to trying to find her parents again, it's actually pretty powerful and engaging. And just the scene with the seashells when she reunites with them, like, man, that's some pretty strong storytelling and like emotional, great work at like emotional work by Pixar right there. And Marlin and Nemo didn't necessarily have like a ton to do, but what they had to do was still fine. Like I said, it was like a proper use of like reducing the main characters to side characters and So their journey was just kind of like to try reuniting with Dory, and for the most part, it worked for me. I mean, there were a couple like issues I took with some of the conveniences and contrivances of like the fountain, like shooting Marlin and Nemo perfectly into the like bucket they or uh, fishbowl they need to be in, or just like I had issues with how mean spirited Marlin was in the beginning and just seemingly out of character with how cruel he was towards Dory and telling her to forget about her, to just go and forget stuff. Like, I wasn't a fan of that stuff, but overall, like, I did enjoy their characters. Um, and yeah, my guy Hank. Hank to me was like a very strong character in this movie. Like he had a great camaraderie with Dory, and like his cynicism was like pretty interesting, kind of a cool aspect to his character. Um, and you could kind of just it was a good use of like um, I guess showing without really telling, where we know that he's a septopus, which is like something kind of went wrong there. Like, why isn't he an octopus rather than a septopus? But you assume that's probably what drives some of his cynicism. And I thought that that was a pretty smart way to construct his character and like pair him off with like a more innocent Dory. And just as like a quick fact, like the way Hank moves is like it took Pixar years to try to properly master Hank's animation movements. Like, it is really cool to watch. That's one of the top highlights of this movie. It's like its animation and the way that they depict Hank's kind of slippery and slimy movements. Like, Pixar doesn't slack. Pixar doesn't slack. They make sure to put in top tier effort with their animation and their styles. So, very enjoyable movie. Number 2, Incredibles 2. So, just for context, the first Incredibles movie is my favorite, not only Pixar movie, but my favorite animated movie of all time. Like, I mean, I absolutely love that movie. I'm a huge fan of superhero movies and animated films, and like, this is like a perfect combination, or the first movie is a perfect combination of both of them. So, on to Incredibles 2. I actually got to see it in the theaters when I was in high school. I had to wait quite a while for it, as all you did. And for me, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I thoroughly enjoyed myself with this film. Um, I think that the way that they just kind of structure the family dynamics and the action throughout it's just very engaging to watch. Like, I mean, some of the scenes with like them at the dinner table having arguments, some of them were quite funny. I mean, just the style of the action sequences when they're fighting the Underminer and like trying to stop the train that was going backwards. It's just like beautiful animation, and like they really well utilize Elastigirl's elasticity in this movie. So yeah, it's definitely thoroughly enjoyable, and it's definitely improved and helped by the fact that it does take a lot from the plot template of the first movie. Kind of just switches Mr. Incredible's role with Mrs. Incredible. But I think it still worked. I think it still worked. Like, Elastigirl's a very enjoyable character, and just watching her trying to do all this undercover hero work, and like especially the scene where she's trying to track the screenslaver with the screenslaver talking over it, like that's one of the highlights of the movie. Like, you're just kind of watching it while screenslaver is talking about how we're controlled by screens, but you're just so mesmerized by all that Elastigirl is doing that like you don't even fully recognize that screenslaver's message is related to your distractions in that very moment. Like, I mean, it's just some really quality messaging and like visual storytelling. But I also enjoyed Mr. Incredible's role as like the stay-at-home dad, where he's just um, taking care of the kids and trying to get Dash's homework done. Like, I mean, it's quite funny. It's quite funny, and then just nice to kind of see a dad that's trying to be there for his kids. And I mean, the big standout of this movie is definitely Jack. No doubt about it. Like, I mean, he's just super funny pretty much every time that he's on the screen. And his fight with the raccoon is probably the overall best scene in the movie. My theater definitely had a kick out of that, and I heard a ton of people just like saying he was the standout after it ended. So, I mean, if I had to like go into negatives, I mean, the villain is pretty obviously an error in this film. Like, she's just very dull, pretty predictable, and just has a very stupid plan. Like, I don't know, it feels like this movie maybe could have gone through another rewrite or development to make her plans make a little bit more sense. But with what was given, I still thought that overall this film worked. And oh yeah, and also I hope they do something with the Underminer eventually. It was kind of disappointing that he just kind of vanished from the film. And I also wish they fleshed out a little bit more the side superheroes that helped out. But overall, like, it's still a very good movie to me. It's a great film. I do thoroughly enjoy it. Definitely not as good as the first Incredibles, but that's still a great film. And that leaves number one. Monsters University. Yeah, this one wasn't even really much of a question for me. Like, I absolutely love this film. This is actually a top 10 animated film of all time for me. And it actually influenced where I wanted to go to college. It's hard to fully describe just like what makes this movie work so great, but it's just like such a feel-good movie to me, even though it has kind of like a unique message that's like not necessarily the most pleasant and flowery. But I mean, I just love Mike and Sully's camaraderie throughout the film, and the way in which Mike is trying to study to be a scarer and has to go through a fraternity and scare games and going up against the jocks. Like, it was thoroughly enjoyable to watch. And on a quick pause right there, like, this movie has one of the top, like, to me, energizing scores in any movie, where it's like the score that's played when Mike is studying for his scare test, like that nah, 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 that whole thing. I mean, I love that. Like, I just think of that in my head when I'm trying to like achieve stuff throughout college and like throughout just life activities all the time. Like, I love that. But I mean, in general, just his whole camaraderie with Sully, and just the way that they both kind of complete each other in the perfect way, where Mike has all of the knowledge but none of the talent, and Sully has all the talent and none of the knowledge. I mean, it just works. It just works very well. And like, I mean, that ending, that's what this movie is mostly known for, is its third act message. And I definitely agree. It's powerful. It's powerful. Like, the way it kind of is the antithesis to most Disney movies in general, that are all about, you know, follow your dreams. And this one kind of is more realistic and like firm, where it's like sometimes, you know, you may follow your dreams and do everything right, but it doesn't happen. And you still can have a very powerful and bright future. And I think that's like something that's just very inspiring to me. And it definitely elevates this movie and makes it like an even more enjoyable and unique, distinct film beyond just a generic college film or something. And like I said, this movie actually like heavily inspired my actual college decisions. Like I loved the environment of Monsters University, like the energy, the college community, the trumpets, like all that stuff was just like so cool to me. And like I wanted to go to a school that kind of mimicked the environment and the surroundings of Monsters University. But yeah, just kind of even going further, like, I mean, the whole fraternity that Mike's in is just like, all of them have their own like little funny quirks with Don Carlton and just like his sticky tentacles, or like Scott just popping up out of nowhere. Yeah, there's just so many great things about this movie. The friendship that's formed, it can be very funny. It can just oozes a lot of energy to me. Like I just absolutely love this movie. I watched this during a moment when I was pretty sad, and I mean, this movie was just like such a nice little uplifting film to me. It's just such a feel-good film. It's just colorful, entertaining, funny, lively, and it actually influenced where I decided to go to college. So it had a pretty big impact on my life. I definitely very much love this film, and it certainly deserves kind of more like underrated status that, and the more due credit that people have been giving it lately. So absolutely, for me, Monsters University comes out on top. But that is the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your ranking of your favorite non-Toy Story Pixar sequels, or if you want to include Toy Story, that's okay too. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.